Hey guys, Patricia here. We're now at the final part of the Metroid retrospective. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2, I've left links in the description. With that said, let's begin. Things looked bright for the Metroid franchise in 2004 after Nintendo's faith in it was finally restored following the commercial success of Metroid Prime 1 and 2. So now it must be time for Prime 3, right? Well, not quite yet. Retro Studios knew the revolution, now known as Nintendo Wii, was coming soon. Hence, they decided to hold off on its release. During this time, a producer at Nintendo's headquarters in Japan, who goes by the name Kensuke Tanabe, came up with an idea for a new Metroid game on the Nintendo DS. Initially, he wanted to reach out to Retro Studios for help with the development, but unfortunately, Retro was busy working on another project. As a result, Tanabe turned his head towards NST, which was one of Nintendo's first-party developers. During an interview, it was stated that Tanabe wanted this Metroid game to be developed specifically by Western developers, in order to appeal to the Western audience. This is a rather important point, as it shows us that just like the 8-bit and 32-bit era, the Metroid franchise was still only prominent in the West and not in Japan. In the initial stages of development, the NST team had planned to take advantage of the Wi-Fi capabilities of the DS by creating wireless multiplayer. In order to improve on Prime 2's multiplayer, they decided to introduce new bounty hunters so that players can choose a character other than Samus. All the fans were excited about this until it was revealed at E3 of 2005 that the online multiplayer was going to be cancelled due to lack of time. NST received many complaints from fans afterwards, and surprisingly, the release date was pushed back in order for the team to include an online multiplayer. Power to the players. No, not them. The game was released in March of 2006 called Metroid Prime Hunters. The game takes place in between Metroid Prime 1 and 2. This can be further confirmed by the fact that Samus's ship is the one from Metroid Prime, while her suit is from Echo's. In a galaxy far, far away beyond the grasp of the Galactic Federation lies the Olympic Cluster. And from this very place, a group of bounty hunters started hearing voices in their heads that said, "The secret to ultimate power resides in the Olympic Cluster." Completely lured by this amazing news, they all scrambled to the Olympic Cluster to claim this power for themselves, killing whatever lies in their way. A bit rash, aren't we? Samus is sent to learn more about this secret message and also to secure this ultimate power. With help from artists at Retro Studios, the design closely mimics that of the Prime series. In a graphical standpoint, it succeeded. Everything looks great, especially for a DS game. But in some cases, I felt it tried too hard to copy Metroid Prime, notably with a 3-dimensional map. Because of hardware limitations, it looks like jumbled up orange blobs, and it's a real pain to navigate. In terms of controls, the aiming is very accurate with the use of the stylus, but rest assured, if you play for more than an hour, you're in for some serious muscle cramps. Luckily though, there's an option to switch control schemes. Aside from those few things, the devs did a decent job at recreating the atmosphere of a Metroid Prime game, considering that it's on a handheld device. During the development for Hunters, Tanabe realized the fact that Samus can morph into a ball. Then, why not a pinball game? He then turned his head towards Fuse Games, whom are responsible for the successful Pro Pinball series on the PC, and also for Mario Pinball Land. Tanabe and Fuse proceeded to discuss how the Metroid theme could be implemented into this upcoming pinball game. It was April of 2005, and little was known about the development until the codename Project Code Metroid Pinball was revealed in a DS catalog. The following month, a short trailer was shown at E3, and the game was officially released in October of 2005, called Metroid Prime Pinball. There isn't really a plot behind Metroid Prime Pinball, but it does loosely retell the story of Metroid Prime. Morphball Samus must collect a number of artifacts in order to gain access to the Artifact Temple and defeat Metroid Prime. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of pinball, but I gotta say, this isn't just an ordinary pinball game. The moving enemies and real-time action changes up the gameplay very nicely. So you're not just flapping those two things the entire time. Most of the graphical effects in the game are pre-rendered, giving it a really nice look. One major challenge the Fuse team had to face was the dreadful blind gap in between the two DS screens. Obviously, they couldn't solve the problem by putting the whole pinball table onto one screen, cause that would make everything look too squished. Instead, they added flappers in the top screen to give players a reference to work with. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen this? It's a Nintendo DS Rumble Pack, and it was included for free with Metroid Prime Pinball. However, it makes more noise than the loudest phone vibrating on a table. You'd probably have a better time playing the game without it. As I've mentioned before, Retro Studios started development on Metroid Prime 3 early on. In October of 2004 to be exact. They were holding off to release the game as a launch title for the Nintendo Wii. According to Michael Kalba, the president of Retro, during the development process they worked closely with Nintendo, specifically Tanabe and Sakamoto. Tanabe ensured that the game was of Nintendo quality. You know, that little seal you see on the back of the box? Yeah, that's what it means. On the other hand, Sakamoto laid out the do's and don'ts for Samus as a character, which Retro Studios had to follow. Looking back, it's obvious the main attraction of the Wii was the motion controls. Hence, the team took a lot of time thinking about how they could optimize it. Quoting from Mark Piscini, the game director, he says, "Beyond anything else, we really had to prove the controller, and I think that's what this project became." Further on, he states that when the Wiimote Nunchuck controller was first introduced, he became concerned because of the lack of buttons. This later led to the decision to stack Samus's beam upgrades. The game was finally released in August of 2007 called Metroid Prime 3: Corruption. It was initially planned to be a launch title, but was delayed a number of times due to polishing. The story carries off 6 months after the events of Prime 2. Samus, along with 3 other bounty hunters, are called in by the Galactic Federation to discuss a virus that has infected the Aurora unit networks. But all of a sudden, space pirates attack, and all the hunters are immediately dispatched to Norion to activate its laser defense system. Right when their mission was about complete, Dark Samus knocks everyone out. Luckily, Samus had just enough energy to activate the laser defense before she passed out. 1 month later, Samus wakes up and discovers her body can produce Phazon. I swear, with all of the Phazon Samus has been exposed to, wouldn't she have some sort of cancer by now? I don't know. But the scientist equips Samus with a PED suit. Later, she's tasked with a mission to destroy 3 Leviathan seeds, and to find the whereabouts of the other 3 bounty hunters who were lost during their mission.
Good luck.
Metroid Prime 3 is the first Metroid game in which Samus actually interacts with members of the Federation and other bounty hunters. This obviously came along with a good amount of voice acting, which were all done very well.
Thanks, Sammy.
Contrary to what some others may think, I actually like the little action segments in the game. Yanking off shields and plates with my nunchuck felt rather satisfying. Also, instead of rehashing old puzzle elements, Corruption features some unique ways Samus could use her upgrades. With the added horsepower of the new hardware, the team was able to amp up the visuals, such as the inclusion of bloom lighting and particle effects. Combined with the various areas, Corruption is easily the best looking out of all the Prime games. But it's also the least difficult. And this is mainly due to the Hyper Mode feature. Though this mode doesn't last very long, it's enough to take out a group of enemies with ease. In fact, the drop in difficulty was intentional according to Mark Piscini. He says, One of the aspects that we thought about was the difficulty and how you're never worried about dying until you get to a boss battle, because the player shouldn't be afraid to explore. I understand what he's saying, but I still think Hyper Mode is overpowered. Overall, the game is still very enjoyable and definitely a good start for newcomers to the Metroid universe. Back in 2004, nearing the end of development for Prime 2, senior producer Brian Walker suggested to compile all the Prime titles onto one disc as a Trilogy edition so that players would have easier access to the Phazon saga. Nintendo accepted the idea and gave the go-ahead. This was perfect because Metroid fans were actually requesting a Trilogy edition shortly after the release of Corruption. Metroid Prime Trilogy was released in August of 2009. The main difference was the addition of motion controls in Metroid Prime 1 and 2. In an interview with senior software engineer Aaron Walker, Retro Studios loved the speedrunning community and recognized how much fans enjoyed speedrunning Metroid Prime. They also acknowledged the amount of effort speedrunners put into cutting the time down, even with sequence breaking. But as responsible game producers, that had to be fixed in the Trilogy. Sometime in 2006, realizing the Wii's capabilities, Sakamoto started brainstorming ideas for a new Metroid game. Since him and his team only had experience with 2D Metroids, Sakamoto decided to reach out for help. During Sakamoto's search, he wanted to find a partner that could contribute their strengths while balance his team's weaknesses. Sakamoto eventually approached Team Ninja since they had experience with 3D action games, notably the Ninja Gaiden series. Team Ninja was able to understand and grasp Sakamoto's idea and soon became partners. Sakamoto intends the game to have many cinematics due to the focus on story. Hence, D-Rockets was brought in to create the cutscenes. This new formed trio team was called Project M. Sakamoto told the lead of Team Ninja, Yosuke Hayashi, that he wanted the game to be controlled with only the Wiimote. At first, Hayashi thought he was nuts. However, with more elaboration, he realized Sakamoto wanted an action game that would appeal to modern players, but with simple controls. No matter how hard button mapping got, the team never resorted to the nunchuck. I actually disagree with this, and I'll explain why very soon. The game was released in August of 2010 called Metroid Other M. The story carries off shortly after the events of Super Metroid. Samus awakens in the Federation headquarters while dreaming of the events between Mother Brain and the baby Metroid. Poor thing. It was literally born, locked up, kidnapped, then died for Samus. Anyways, she enters a short training sequence monitored by an officer. Oh my god, he looks creepy. And then proceeds to a council meeting where they announce the successful annihilation of Zebes and all Metroids. After a few weeks, Samus intercepts a baby's cry.
Codename Baby's Cry.
Due to the shock of witnessing the baby Metroid's death, she is compelled that this signal is for her. Samus pursues and heads towards the bottle ship, where she soon encounters a GF platoon in the middle of their mission and ends up joining them. There's a lot to say about Other M. First of all, you realize that the platoon leader, Adam Malkovich, has decided to ban Samus from using many of her upgrades, including her suits, which makes no sense to me as her variant gravity suit can benefit her and harms nobody.
Adam hadn't authorized it.
Now, if you've been following the Metroid community, you'll know that many feel Other M is the black sheep of the series. One of the main reasons is that Samus's personality wasn't what everyone had in mind. Her character is overall very mellow, and her monotonous voice doesn't help either. However, this seems to be intentional according to Sakamoto. In an interview, he says, "Up until now, we've created the Samus who is indeed a strong, charming, and a very cool heroine. But what we're hoping to create is a Samus now that not just fans of Metroid will appreciate, but everyone who is experiencing the game." This seems to imply that Sakamoto wanted to portray Samus as a vulnerable heroine, just like a normal human being.
Because I was so young when I lost both of my parents, there's no question I saw Adam as a father figure.
But the problem with this is that she's not just a normal human, she's the #1 bounty hunter. It also appears that Sakamoto is firm with this decision because when asked in a separate interview if he had any regrets, he said no, and was happy with the final product. But will fans welcome this emotionally weak Samus with open arms? Probably not. Another big problem Other M had was the plot inconsistencies, notably Samus's encounter with Ridley. Even though she has already encountered him like 1,000 times, she acts as if it was her first.
Ridley?
And oh my goodness, the controls. Being restricted to control Samus in a 3D environment with a D-pad felt very unnatural. Taking Sakamoto's intentions into account, I still felt they should have at least gave us the option to use the nunchuck. On top of this, the first-person transitions for using missiles felt very restricting. There were times when I would want to use missiles, but due to its immobility and delay, I never found myself using it unless I had to. On a better note, D-Rockets did a phenomenal job with the cutscenes, as they're one of the best I've seen on the Wii. Also, there are enough distinct environments and boss fights to keep things fresh. With the mixed reception and weak sales of Other M, hopes for a new Metroid game in the near future is grim. Looking back at the success of the Prime series, perhaps Nintendo should revisit Metroid as a first-person shooter, or maybe just as the classic scroller. Either way, Metroid fans around the world still hold the franchise close to their hearts. Let's hope that Nintendo will find a way to revive the Metroid series and bring it back to its former glory. Alright, this concludes our journey with Samus Aran along with our Metroid retrospective. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Now, here's a little riddle. Solve it, and the secrets of our next retrospective shall be yours. My skin's a bit scaly, nothing like Barney. But in terms of color, it's like no other. I love balloon rides, cause they help me get by. Though it costs money, it's okay, I have plenty. But don't ever cross me, cause when I charge full speed, I can be deadly.